Hi, I'm Joe Saunders with Miniature Landscape Hobbies, and in this episode, I'm going to detail for you a method for improving the speed and quality of your Napoleonics 28mm Wargaming models. We're going to use some awesome new products, namely the Mig Dio Drybrush paint. Let's get to it. Miniature Landscape Hobbies is proudly supported by these sponsors. I think the miniature painting community has, by now, adapted to the variety of zenithal painting products that are out there. Whether you choose Citadel Contrast, Vallejo Color Express, or my favorite, Army Painter Speed Paints, these products have the potential to revolutionize your skills as a miniature painter. And I think it's safe to say that these paints just are not a fad, and they'll likely be in everyone's painting arsenal for years to come. But one thing remains essentially constant for zenithal techniques: the need to underpaint. This really can't change if you want to paint in this style, as you need to put your shading layers down to take advantage of the transparency of your zenithal paints. And these layers, which for the most part rely on dry brushing, can be kind of tricky to do. Recently, a viewer commented that my work has looked kind of chalky lately, which is absolutely true. This isn't caused by my speed paints per se, but by the dry brush layers that the speed paints tint in order to create contrast. Now, for the most part, this chalkiness doesn't bug me, because up until now, I've used zenithal techniques only on rank and file. Rank and file models just have to look okay in groups, and most importantly, they have to be fast to paint. Therefore, a little bit of chalkiness or inconsistency in the textures is fine by me. However, recently I've decided to expand my horizons so I can unleash the awesomeness of speed paints on everything from lowly line infantry to the most vaunted marshals of the Empire. This means that I really do need to commit to find a product to combat this chalkiness. Fortunately, with some searching, I came across a nifty new option. Well, at least new to me. This is the product known as the Mig Dio Drybrush paint. Now, I hear you say, you could pre-moisten the bristles or use any other finicky, if slightly inconsistent dry brush workaround, and there are quite a few out there. But I didn't really want a complex solution. I decided I'd only accept an out-of-the-jar product that works first time, every time, to keep my painting workflow as fast and convenient as possible. For this video, I'm going to put the power of speed paints to the test, layered over the Mig Dio Drybrush paint, to see if this is the answer to smooth underpainting. So, with all that out of the way, let's get down to the process. I'd like to take a quick moment to thank my Patreon supporters. Without their assistance, Miniature Landscape Hobbies would not be possible. If you would like to learn more about the benefits of becoming a Patreon supporter, please check the link in the video description. To start this project, I decided to use a set of Wargame's French Line Lancers. I prepared the horses separately with a different, more traditional method, and to do this, I just dry brushed on regular acrylics. This whole process for the horses is covered in a separate video, so I'll put a link up here. I figured I would use the riders as the subject of this video though, and I reserved the Dio Drybrush paint for them. As usual, I primed the riders dark gray from a rattle can, then I got out the Dio paints. Out of the jar, these have a very thick gel-like consistency, and after wicking the excess away on paper towel, like you do with any other paint that you're about to dry brush, they appeared to give really good coverage. Then with my new AK dry brush, I went ahead and with light pressure first dry brushed the models light gray, followed by flower white. The results really went on super smooth. It's almost difficult to describe how the paint just layered on without the scratchy scrubbing sensation of regular acrylics. But on it went, and it looked great, with even gradients, and very little sign of a chalky finish. With the underpainting ready, I went to work with the speed paints. As always, I worked from the largest segment of the model to the smallest. This meant Absolution Green was the first color, as the cavalry unit I was emulating wore green uniforms. I also chose yellow cuffs, collars, and facings, so I used Zealot Yellow, which is a nice orange yellow. The large gloves and crossbelts are white, so I applied Howling Sand, and where the riders had greatcoats tied across their bodies, these were painted with Runic Gray. I won't go into great depth on these specific techniques because I've covered the actual application of speed paints in numerous other videos. But one thing that is worth noting is that once the majority of the main colors have been applied, I always go back and look the models over, searching for spots to put extra highlights. When painting miniatures, contrast is extremely important. This is done by creating a gradient of color from darkest to lightest, ranging from the most shadowed areas to the highest points, which are usually the hard edges of the model that reflect the most direct sunlight. Speed paints excel at helping with this because as they lay over the darker and lighter underpainting, their semi-transparent nature creates a range of similar contrast, building tones all just with one coat. However, I do feel that certain colors, especially when they're unthinned, just do not yield a proper final highlight. So at this point, I look for spots in need of an exaggerated highlight. When I find them, I take out an acrylic paint that's a similar but lighter color to its corresponding speed paint and mix a 50-50 blend. Then I use a small brush to paint the very edges or most reflective areas on the model. So for the green uniforms, I mix 50-50 Absolution Green with AK Interactive Sky Green. Then I brush this on the sharp folds of the clothing, the upper shoulders, kneecaps, etc. With the highlighting done, I move on to the flesh tones. Since I'm working with speed paint for the flesh tones, I repaint the hands and faces with light flesh as a base. Then I put the speed paint Crusader flesh over top of this. After some experimenting over the last few months, I've concluded that speed paint flesh tones work the best over very light base colors. So I don't mess around and just redo the underpainting for any skin with a very light color before I get the speed paints out. The largest and most important colors are now done, so I go ahead and hunt down the small details. These small sharp details are where speed paints, when applied over the Dio Drybrush layers, really excel. The texture and size just seems to work best with speed paints. Often I find on boots and other small areas, the notion that speed paints are a one-coat solution really does apply. At least for rank and file models. Character or display models would be a different story, of course, and you would want multiple layers. Here I must touch on the speed paint metallics. I used Hoplite Gold and Broadsword Silver on the decorations, helmets, and weapons, and these paints did a fine job with just one layer. I was quite pleased, as basically, I hate metallic paints. But these look good, and since these are rank and file models, one coat looked good enough. Now I'm near the end, but I always like to give the contrast one last boost. Strangely, I think that the Dio paints went on so smoothly that some of the more extreme but necessary jumps between light and dark were missing. That was okay though, as over the years I found the solution to this is lining in with black enamel. To do this, I give the model a couple coats of satin varnish and leave it to dry. When this is done, I get out mineral spirits and gently brush on a very light layer over the model. Then, while the surface is still moist, I get out black enamel panel liner and dab it on. The combination of the varnish and pre-moistening with thinner draws the enamels into the deepest recesses and around the details on the model surface, making for a nice dark border that really makes elements of the model pop. With this, the painting was basically done. I mounted the models to the completed horses by filing away the paint on any points of contact between the rider and mount, and then I glued it all together. Next, I based everything and added a final layer of matte varnish to reduce shine and protect all of my work. And with this, the project was finished. Going back over the results, I was quite pleased with the whole process. Though the horses remained a little chalky because I used regular acrylics on them, the riders with the Dio Drybrush paints appeared to be very smooth, and the coverage of the overlying speed paints seemed to settle where they needed to and went on without unnecessary pooling. Though let's face it, if you really look, you can still see some chalkiness where I applied the Dio Drybrush paint. However, what you can see, I feel, is much more subtle than with regular paints. Moving forward, I'll be keeping the Dio Drybrush paints nearby, and I'll continue to pair it with my speed paints, as the two products seem to make a very good combination to get the best results for miniature painting. If you have any ideas that relate to dry brushing and underpainting for using speed paints, please make sure to add them in the comments. By sharing our ideas, we can help the community grow, and that's what our hobby is all about in the end. If you'd like to learn more about painting Napoleonic character models, please consider watching this video. Or maybe you'd like to check out this other video instead. Thanks for watching, and as always, remember to keep building life in miniature.